right, thank you very much for coming. My name is Vincent, and I'll be your presenter for this hour and a half. So for this workshop, it's workshop 4, so supporting children with special needs. And I'll be kind of explaining about different strategies to use when working with people with disabilities, whether you're a parent, maybe a support worker, or a behavior interventionist, or a respite worker. These people all work with people with disabilities, and they kind of maintain and support them and provide them with independence in the future. So a little bit about my biography. So I was head coordinator at the summer camp at RCD for I think almost 10 years. From like coordinator all the way up to head coordinator. I'm also currently a behavior interventionist for many years for neurodiverse children, youth, and adults. And also right now, I'm currently employment support manager, so it's a completely different role. But I kind of work with youth with barriers to their employment and kind of get them employed. All right, so the agenda. So I'll be talking briefly about terminology. So you might not really realize exactly what I meant by respite worker or behavior interventionist. I'll be kind of explaining a little bit more about those descriptions, those ideas. Also, I'll be talking about routines. So children with disabilities require some routine, and I'll tell you exactly why and what would happen if there's no routine involved. Visual supports, first then, so kind of the strategy that we use commonly. Give choices, so we'll be offering choices instead of just straight up telling them what to do. And also timers. The use of a timer, a visual kind of cue, would kind of be able to transition them better than if you weren't to use a timer. And also triggers and stimming. I'll explain what stimming means and how it's not really a bad thing, stimming. And meltdowns, and also you get to meet Bob. So it'll be a group discussion. So as you might have noticed in front of you, there's might be a piece of paper. So I'm going to split you guys into 3 groups, and each of your groups have a different question, and I'll kind of want you to talk about that and answer that to my liking, essentially. Yeah. So the terminology. So MCFD and CLBC. Which one of you guys know exactly what those mean?
This organization, COBC.
Yeah, CLBC.
Yeah.
So Community Living,
Community
British Columbia.
BC.
Yeah, and MCFD is Ministry of Children and Family Development. So that's the 2 kind of organizations that kind of work with people with disabilities in BC, and some of these organizations have funding to provide for parents to be able to support their child. BI. So I did talk about BIs before, but it's just an acronym. BIs are behavioral interventionists. So that's what I kind of do on the side. And respite worker. So does anyone know what a respite worker does?
No. Relieve the parents?
Yes, exactly. So you relieve
Yeah.
the parents, kind of give them like a kind of
Break.
a relaxing break, essentially. Yeah, so that's what a respite worker does. And it's actually very important for people with disabilities and their families. So IEP, this is a very common acronym that's been used for schools and people with disabilities. And anyone know what IEP is? Okay, it's an
Individual education plan.
Nice, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it is an individual educational plan. Sometimes it's yearly. It also just provides the support for specialists and also people that work with a child with disability in kind of seeing what their objectives are and also seeing what kind of target behavior should be implemented. And scripting. So scripting is like kind of repeating words over and over again, repeating phrases or words or sounds. So sometimes you might see a person with disability kind of repeating themselves quite a bit. It's not harmful. It's just them being just kind of just repeating that just so it could be various different reasons, but it could be for them to understand exactly what's being said, or it could just be something that they just heard and just wants to repeat.
Can you open it?
Transitions. So I'm sure many of you guys know what a transition is. So basically for me, if I'm to transition from speaking to like kind of doing another activity, so that's kind of a transition. So transitionary periods are very important for children, but there are a few things that might not be appropriate to use when working with people with disabilities if you don't find the right ways of transitioning them. So for instance, using timers is a pretty good method of transitioning individuals, or sometimes visual cues is a good transition as well. So maybe just, okay, this picture is, this has a timer, and it gives you the opportunity just to know exactly how much time you have left. Meltdowns and tantrums. So I'll be explaining about tantrums in children with disabilities and how sometimes you could kind of get past it and avoid it altogether if you make the right steps. Sometimes you can't. It's hard to do. Stimming. So stimming is kind of like a repetitive, similar to scripting. Oops. So scripting is kind of like, so stimming is kind of, you're overwhelmed, essentially, and then you have to kind of do something to kind of release that. ASL. Does anyone know what ASL means?
No. American Sign Language?
Yes, American Sign Language, that's correct. So American Sign Language is a tool that people use, especially if you're nonverbal. Some children might understand different signs, like more, or eat, or whatnot. I used to know a little bit, but now not that much. But yeah, some people, like some children I worked with, they only rely on ASL, and sometimes they use the PECS. I'll explain a little bit more about PECS, but they use the picture exchange communication system in order to communicate and to understand what's going on. ABA. What is ABA? It's applied behavioral analysis. So it is it's not really a technique, but it's more a therapy for people with disabilities, namely people with autism spectrum disorder. So they kind of use this to kind of be able to kind of understand and appreciate the be able to communicate better, essentially. TBI. This one is a little bit more common. Do you guys know what TBI is?
Traumatic brain injury?
Yes, traumatic brain injury. So some children might have a traumatic brain injury, and that might kind of make them unable to kind of communicate properly, or unable to do things as they were doing before. ASD. It's autism spectrum disorder. Yeah, so it's ASD. So it's very similar. ADHD or ADD, so they're the same thing, essentially. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so that's a neurodevelopmental disability as well. PECS. I did talk about PECS. Does anyone remember what I said? Okay. It's a picture exchange communication system. So it's kind of a way that people use to be able to kind of communicate and to understand what you're asking them to do. I'll explain a little bit later on. But yeah, first then. So first then is a strategy that many support workers use, myself included, to kind of get them to understand and kind of teach them behaviors. For instance, I'll say first we'll do a circle time, and then you take a break. So the first usually would have to be something that's not preferred, so that's something that you're targeting for them to do. And the then would normally be more of a preferred activity, so snacks, a break, any of that type of preferred activity would usually be the then. Okay, so routines. So like I said before, why do children need routine? Yes, essentially they'll need structure, and they need a routine, and if they are suddenly asked to do something else randomly, they might get upset, they'll be feeling stressed, and they'll feel anxious and all that. Yeah, so predictability relieves stress, but the routines could actually be used to improve or teach new behaviors. So could you give me a couple examples of a few routines that children might use? Yes, Elsa.
Reading books.
Reading books, yes, yeah.
Play games.
Play games. So maybe playing games like appropriately. So you might want to teach them something appropriate about playing games. So you might want to use that also on top of other strategies that I've mentioned. Is there anyone else?
Walking.
Walking, yes, yeah. Walking, brushing teeth, putting on clothes. So some children might have difficulties putting on clothes. So having a routine might kind of improve their ability to do that independently. Okay. And for routines especially, you might use social stories. So I'll explain a little bit more about social stories, or visual supports to kind of add on to the routine. So that would be kind of beneficial for the child. But I'm actually seeing a problem with this cat activity. So what do you think I could add on to this to make it more appealing? Okay, thank you. So pictures. So pictures are very important. So sometimes they might not understand what a dance party is or outdoor games. So you might have a picture of like a person playing soccer, or a person like running around or something like that. So that's always going to add to their interest as well. Changes in routine. So like I said before, routine disruption is very detrimental to children with disabilities, because routines kind of provide this predictability, essentially. It will cause anxiety, stress, lack of concentration, and all that. So it's important to actually have routine, but also you might have to introduce some flexibility depending on the comfort level of the child. So sometimes you might have routines, but you might kind of just do less and less routine, and just try to manage their emotions comfortably with, just essentially manage the comfort comfortably. Yeah. Okay, so, all right, cool. Sensory overload, so overstimulation. So as you see, this person, he's kind of freaking out for all these activities. This person, it seems like the sound is a little bit too much for him. I actually know one kid that he's a yeller, he's a screamer. So he comes up to us, covers his ears, and then screams. So do you expect what screaming like that would do to other kids? Yeah, I think it'll make it worse, right? So I think his screams provoked other people and into having their own episodes. So that's why we had to kind of remove the child away from the group, or remove the group away from the child, depending on the level of intensity. But the kid was super cute. He just, and if you like stop him from covering his ears, he still does it. So, so overstimulation is one or more of the body's 5 senses. Children with disabilities are especially sensitive to sounds, to smells, to lights. So sometimes a person might be in a room that's really, really bright and might kind of get more anxious. So, and then they might kind of get into a mood, and it might get worse and worse and might escalate. So at that point, when you realize the triggers for that particular child, you might kind of reduce the level of stimulation. Smell, texture of food also can overstimulate someone. The taste of food, sensation of clothing. So sometimes a shirt might be too rough. It might kind of escalate situations. It might kind of cause a meltdown or a tantrum. Patterns as well. Actually, some people might be epileptic to patterns, so they might be triggered by patterns. So they'll see a pattern and then have a seizure. So it's actually very important for us to kind of prevent that from happening. So that's why we have to, depending on the child, we have to kind of look at everything around the child and prevent it from happening in the first place. So being mindful of these possible triggers is actually really important. Especially if you're working with someone that you haven't worked before, you might want to kind of talk to the parents, the guardians, the support worker, just to kind of learn more about the person, just to kind of reduce the chances of them having a trigger to be overstimulated. Right. So, meltdowns. So it's similar to sensory overload. It's kind of like, it's a little bit different in that for meltdowns, it's just frustration. So they can't really express what they want, or can't really express they don't want to do something, so that's when they have a meltdown. And part of that reason would be due to routine disruption, perhaps. And there are many different triggers. Sometimes you'll be able to kind of tell right straight off the bat. Sometimes you might need a few more sessions with the person. Sometimes you can't really see any, but triggers can also cause aggressive behavior, obviously, self-harm, running away. So if you're kind of having a trigger, you might want to just run away from the situation. So it's not on you, it's more on them trying to run away from the situation, and it's on the person that's helping them to kind of manage their emotions and also prevent it from happening. It could be noise, so triggers that cause excessive noise, screaming, or throwing or lashing out. So some children, like when they have a meltdown, they are very aggressive, so you'd have to kind of manage that as well. So meltdowns are recognizable and preventable, and they're actually really normal. So everyone would have meltdowns, although sometimes people with disabilities, they might have more of it. And they can be triggered by too much overload. Okay, so I have two videos. I'm going to show one of them. Let's see. Maybe I'll just show down here. A shorter one. So she's actually, this this person made the right call, kind of noticed that he was having a little bit of a meltdown, put him in a different room, but I would like the room to be a little bit more clear and things that you can't just throw like that. So yes. So in this situation, you might want to take a step back. This child isn't really hurting himself or hurting other people, but he might just require some time for himself. So you might want to dim the lights down. I see that she's clearing the stuff, which is really good because she's pretending like he doesn't really matter. Obviously, he matters, but I think this child is more focused on his anger, not really focused on other people as well. So pretend like he doesn't really exist might be the good thing.
Whoa.
Oh, what are you doing? Oh.
Time off.
So yes, he gave us some time off essentially. But yeah, so there are a few things that were good from that clip, and some things that were bad. We all know that she's trying, and they were able to kind of work and calm this person down in the end. But in the very beginning, though, when the kid dropped his peaches, what do you think would be like beneficial for the kid to, instead of just being like, "Oh, do you want banana?" What do you think would be beneficial for this kid? You could offer choices, maybe. So you could be like, "Oh, do you want banana or do you want something else?" So by offering the child a choice, kind of compels them to kind of answer, and then you can just kind of give it to them and kind of redirect their attention. Children with disabilities, they kind of want the attention sometimes. So they want you to be concerned, they want you to be upset, and sometimes you being upset provokes them even more. So we want to kind of manage that and mitigate that type of behavior in the long run. And if all else fails, you might have to clear the room or provide a safe space. So like as you saw with the Peaches kid, he was put into a room. There was a lot of toys that you could kind of throw and a lot of things you could bump into. I think because they're used to working with that child, they know that he's not the type of person to kind of hurt themselves. And also the person supporting him was kind of clearing up stuff that he could throw. So that's actually a good place to kind of have them calm down. And as you notice, the kid made strategies themselves to kind of calm down and kind of walked into the playhouse. So that's a good strategy as well. Although this is kind of not really related, but there was this one kid, I think summer camp lasted for 6 weeks, and for 5 weeks he was like, I'm the only person that could control him essentially, so I could just use my words. I remember calling him because they were at the aquarium and they weren't able to get him to do what they were trying to do, like probably I think wash him or something like that. So they actually called me, and I actually spoke to him through the phone to get him to kind of pay attention to the support workers. But I noticed near the end of the summer camp, he started listening to me less and less. But I'm not sure why. But I think it's because I started smiling more, and he just looked at me as another person. So he started like paying attention, started not listening to me as well. But it's not really related, but that's just an interesting story. All right, so visual supports. So picture exchange communication systems, or PECs. I explained that before. So we usually have something like this to kind of show them exactly what it means to have to play golf, or not a good choice, so it's thumbs down, or bathroom, or personal space, or even like listen. So essentially they use PECs to kind of reinforce the behaviors of the child, and you add this on depending on the needs of the child as well. So some children might not require it, but it's good to have. Okay, American Sign Language. So like I said before, all I know is this, and that's for more. Yeah, also thank you, but yeah. So, especially like nonverbal children, so children that can't really verbalize, they might use American Sign Language instead, or some sort of sign. Now, first, then. So as I explained, usually it's a preferred for the first, and then a non-preferred for the then. It doesn't have to be though, and it can be kind of like described verbally, or it can be written. Written is better, especially if you have pictures as well. So first circle and then snack. So could anyone give me an example of a first?
Wash your hands first.
Yeah, wash your hands. So you're gonna wash your hands first, and then what do you get?
Eating.
Eating, yes, yeah. So people like eating. I see you like eating as well. So eating is a very good tool, just to kind of promote positive skills, essentially. Food, it could be kind of a break or whatnot. First can be like arts and crafts as well. So like first we do arts and craft, and then we get outside. So it's always good to have the first as the non-preferred activity, and then identify as a preferred activity. Okay, so give choices. So like I mentioned before, choices are kind of providing some choices for them just to make their own decision. And also it kind of promote for them to listen to you a lot more, and so they won't say no. Just be like, oh, do you want this? No. Or do you want this or this? So kind of have these two choices, and then when they indicate or even when they point, then you know exactly what they want, and then you check it if you're using a check mark thing, and then you give them spaghetti. So always be consistent. So as you see over here, homework, finished homework, play outside, finished outside. So dinner, it's gonna be Lee's choice. So what does he have? Spaghetti or tacos? It's a very wonderful life. He just gets so much good food. And then afterwards, load dishwasher. So it could be, they could use the first then in here as well. So they could have another chart. It says first we'll play outside and then we'll have dinner, but that's not as effective, but we can still do that. Or first homework and then play outside. So the pics really help, and children, I think any child really prefers being offered a choice instead of just being told what to do. Timers. So timers are actually very important as well. I prefer the digital timers, so like these ones, yeah, like the 60-second one. So say if you have something that you want to do, so maybe it could be used for a few methods. So it could be used to indicate a transition. So like I mentioned before, we could transition from one activity to another. So maybe you might put 2-minute timer, and then you show him or you get him or her to tap it, and then it'll count down, and then we'll eat snack, or then we'll play basketball or something like that. It's also very good for sharing tasks as well. So maybe you have two kids. Maybe one person has 60 seconds or 5 minutes, and then once the 5 minutes rings, then the kid knows to give the toy to the other person. You could assist them as well, but it's also really good to use to do some sharing activities. Completing tasks as well. So sometimes you might want them to complete a task within a time, usually not, but sometimes you might want them to complete a task for this long, so like for 5 minutes, just work on it, and then after time rings, then you'll have your break. You can also use it for timeout as well, but like Ella explained, it's not the best. So we'll probably save timeouts for some other cases, which is really rare. But it also depends on the child as well. If they respond well to timeouts, then we would use timeouts, but it's very rare. Yeah, so phones. So why wouldn't you want to take out your phone? Could someone tell me? So I've got a phone. This child is like 7 years old. Why would I want to give him my phone or show my phone to him?
The time.
Oh, not the time, but I actually had a timer right here, but I forgot to bring it. So it's not the time, but it's more. What do you do on your phone? So sorry, I heard something.
Play games, right?
Yes, play games. So they'll associate a phone as game time. So once they see a phone, they'll be like, oh, it's time to play games. So they might just kind of switch it or find new games and all that stuff. So it's actually important to actually have a digital timer on hand instead of using your phone. So at the summer camp, especially, we do not want to use our phones at all. So we want to be kind of showing them the appropriate ways of dealing with it, and even if they haven't played games on a phone before, we don't want to kind of show anyone else that this could happen and we could do this. Yeah, but yeah, that looks like a dynamite, but yeah, but essentially digital timers are useful, and maybe just a small little timer like that. So if the child has difficulty like taking turns or kind of like eating nicely, a social story might help. So it depends on the child as well. So social story is you just kind of read what's expected of you. And I'm just gonna play this for a little bit.
Taking turns and sharing. A social story.
This is an example of a social story.
My name is Karen. I love playing with the big blue bus. My friend Coven liked to play with the blue bus too. Sometimes it is my turn to go first, and sometimes it is not. When Coven is playing with the bus, I can say, "Can I have a turn next, please?" I wait until Coven has finished his turn. It is okay and good to wait.
Okay, so essentially that's what a social story is. So it depends on the child as well. Sometimes you might need a social story to introduce a child to appropriate behaviors. So what's expected of them. If you don't have any way of showing someone what's right, they're not going to know what's right. So it's important for people to use social stories to try to teach valuable skills. So what is stimming and why is it important? So I explained stimming is like overstimulated behaviors. So sometimes it might be hand flapping. Sometimes it might be banging against something repeatedly. So it's kind of repetitive or unusual movement or noises. So humming, pacing, rocking. So these are all kind of things that might be familiar to you if you work with people with disabilities.
Why do you rock back and forth when you're focusing? That's called stimming. It's something everybody does to regulate their emotions, but people with things like ADHD and autism tend to do it more frequently. You said everyone stims, but I don't think I have. Ow, what was that for? You pulling your arm away was a reflex, but the way that you're rubbing your arm where I pinched you is a stim because it's a repetitive self-soothing action used to regulate your emotions. Oh.
And so it's used to regulate your emotions. So sometimes you doing stimming behaviors would kind of calm you down a little bit. Sometimes it might be kind of not positive in that it will affect your way of learning new skills. So sometimes people might, sorry, one second. Sometimes you might kind of, when you're doing activities, you might not be kind of learning any new activities, like new stuff. So sometimes we might be doing shoelace tying, and you might have a stim of like maybe flapping your hands, and you're not able to kind of work the shoelace. So that might be an idea that might be a situation where stimming might be a bad thing, but in the right cases is actually it's soothing, and also it's not really negative most cases. Communication difficulty. So like I explained before, visual supports, checkbox, written information, social stories, text, first then, and modifying verbal and written communication. So sometimes children require you to use less complex words. Usually they require sometimes that's why we use it first then, so it's more common. And so sometimes we can't really, you have to use the right words. But eventually you learn that what the right words are, and for the child especially. The general strategies, like I said, provide choices, breaking down tasks in steps. So that's actually very important. So sometimes having a large amount of steps would overwhelm someone. So maybe breaking down to tiny little steps would be beneficial. So instead of just you designing a minion out of toilet paper roll and some colored paper, you might want to be like, oh, could you do these few steps first, and then you'll do some other steps later. First then strategies, transitions, reiterating the words to simple words, changing tasks. Sometimes it might not be beneficial for the child to do the same task as everyone else. So you might want to kind of make something that's easier or more difficult, depending on the person. And you have to give children time to process information and instructions. So if I just say something really quickly, someone might not understand. I might have to say it multiple times. I'm okay with that. Also, last but not least, you have to provide positive reinforcement. So you just being like grumpy and being just dismissive isn't the right way of teaching a child or anyone in general how to do things and how to be appropriate. So you can also ask for eye contact before providing positive reinforcement. So you go, oh hey, eyes here, and then you could be like, good job. So that's positive reinforcement.